now, I wanted to create a thank you. I just had so much fun. I've been up since 5. But I'm going to be tired by noon. I wanted to create 2 spaces. I wanted to create a space to honor the people that have come to these classes over the years, especially during COVID. We've sat and we've gotten to know each other's thoughts, and everybody's been so brave. And I wanted to also honor a birthday. I'll explain more about that now. So what I wanted to give you first off is a little mood, and I've got a special guest for you. So sit back and enjoy this person and just let it wash over you. Go, darling. And can you introduce yourself? You're muted. Just a second. We can't hear you, honey. Unmute. Yes. Now make sure your voice is closer to the phone. Great. Thank you.
Woke up above the ground.
Can you introduce yourself, Kim?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, but a little louder. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Go.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kim Pollard, a good friend of Deb Kimmett, who invited me to sing this morning, and well, I couldn't be happier to do so. Woke up above the ground. Woke up above the ground. Woke up to a tail wagging dog. Woke up above the ground. All hell breaks loose today. I got one good thing to say. Woke up above the ground. Woke up above the ground. You gotta take time, baby. Make time, baby. Count up everything that's gone right. There's only 2 paths you can go by. You either lie down, stand up, and fight. Did you hear that okay, Deb?
That was great.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody else heard it.
All right. Thank you, Kim. So that's great. Kim, next time you come, make sure your voice is closer to the phone, okay, honey? All right.
All right.
So you're going to take off for a bit and come back and I'll text you? Great.
Okay.
Come.
Great voice.
Yeah, she does.
Great voice.
Kim's been
Thank
playing
you.
with me for about 15 or 20 years, and it's really important that she's here on this special day because we've gone through a hell of a lot together. And she's in Napanee, Ontario on Hay Bay. And thank you. I'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, buddy?
Okay. Bye, everyone. Enjoy the class.
Thanks. Okay. So let me tell you a story. Sorry, I've got to get rid of her. She's now.
Yeah, get rid of me, Deb.
I'm trying, honey. You got to just turn yourself off.
Okay. Wouldn't be the first time. Hold on.
You could, I'll
stop
just
video.
remove you.
I've got stop video on, so that should be doing something.
I'll just take you out of the room, okay?
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, there you go. So I want to tell you a story. And that's what we're doing, is we're going to tell stories, right? So I want to tell you mine. I moved to Amherst Island and I was asked to join the Presbyterian Church. And I told the minister I wasn't Christian, and he said, that doesn't matter. Come anyway. So I went a couple of times, and as much as I loved the modern Gospels, I only went for the pie. Pie seemed to be the non-denominational dessert of Amherst Island. The Presbyterian Church had 5 kinds, but the Catholics only went for 2. There was somebody in the United Church that brought carrot cake, but they had to be removed from the island. One time, the minister accidentally held up the Eucharist, and I swear he said body of Christ. I felt guilty that I didn't want to go to church anymore. So I called my Wiccan friend, Ruth, who said, well, just tell them, darling, you're a pagan goddess who needs to commune with nature to access her creative magic. Oh yeah, that'll help me fit in on this small island. Well, my husband, David, he went to the church regularly with the children, and I headed over to the South Shore. I walked for miles. Walking was a practice that I had cultivated when I got into recovery from addiction. It was a practice that I did when I was depressed. I walked to find answers. I walked to find endings to stories. And I walked to know that my marriage was over. Walking the rugged beach of Lake Ontario with a nuclear power plant from New York flashing its ominous warning from the United States was my hit of serotonin. Eventually, I found a special spot on the beach where I planted myself on flat rocks tucked inside the rocks like a cave. I often swam first, starting at the end of May until mid-October. And then I took my pen and paper and moved it across the page and wrote down ideas for a show I was cooking up. I wrote 3 shows on the South Shore, 2 of which were performed at the Presbyterian Church with Kim Pollard. I swam and I wrote and I hollered into the wind. And everybody, could you please mute if you're unmuted, please? I found out that this secret spot was not so secret. I was sitting there writing one day when my daughter had an asthma attack. I was sitting there at the secret rock and a car came screeching around the corner and a volunteer fireman ran down the beach hollering that I needed to get to the school. I asked him, how do you know about my secret spot? And he goes, everybody on the island knows your secret spot. And I thought, oh, honey, if I had a nickel for every time a man said that. But whether people knew me or not was not the point. Taking my spot in the same place every day seemed to inspire others to do the same. My neighbor's wife was dying, and he said he was full of white rage. I told him to go to the South Shore and scream into the wind. And a couple of Sundays later, he saw me and I saw him, but we waved and we both turned the other way because small talk had no place on the South Shore. Space was what I needed to create. And that's what the South Shore gave me. In the city, you keep your elbows up as you serpentine down busy streets. But the island, well, you saw a car coming at you a mile away and you all of a sudden felt crowded. Sometimes the words I wrote on the South Shore were magical. Sometimes I took a match to them and burnt them on a pyre of complaining and self-pity. These were the words that no one should ever read or be found by detectives if I was ever a suspect in a murder trial. Holding the space to be inspired helped me write 2 one-woman plays, comedy turns, CBC, all of that. But the reason I took my space, I wrote for the same reason the chicken crosses the road, to get to the other side. I called the South Shore the Church of the South Shore. It was a rain barrel collecting all my anxieties, 1 drop at a time. So when the dog days of August came and I was dry as a cistern, I could go there and quench my thirst. That was about 15 years ago. I went there and walked and prayed, and all of a sudden, one day I realized I wanted to share my work. And I decided 15 years ago, as of today, to start writing workshops on the island. I waited for the ferry boat to come, and I was so nervous for my students. I was so afraid that I wouldn't do a good job. And now I've done these courses annually at Elena's Cafe, retreat centers, community colleges, Mexican spa, and now here we are during COVID on the land of Zoom. So even though you're here today to explore or to celebrate, it's so important that we hold the space for the creative to visit. It's a revolutionary act in this time to hold 7 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, to see what can come and to see what our voice is supposed to say. So on that first writing workshop 15 years ago, I read a poem that would inspire people, because one of the reasons I think I've enjoyed teaching is that even though I'm a comedian, I have used other mediums to inspire me. And often, in order to get to the creative side of ourselves, we have to piggyback other artists to be inspired by their art. I'm sure you've gone to a piece of music, you hear Kim, you go to opera, you see a sculpture by Michael, who I'm very inspired by. And all of a sudden, I go home and feel there's a point to me holding the space. So because this is a birthday, I want to read you a poem that I read to them many years ago. And how I want you to listen to this is, I want you to listen to the words first, and then I'm going to put it up on the screen, and I want you to take one of the lines from the poem, and you'll write about that line for 7 minutes. Whatever comes to you is excellent. You don't have to do anything with it. It doesn't matter. So if you feel like it and you don't feel too awkward, you can close your eyes and just listen to this. It's by John O'Donohue, and it's called The Space Between Us. It's all about transitions and passages in our lives, and I thought it was perfect for today. And because it's Irish, and Irish is the only accent I can safely do, I thought I'd do a little bit of brogue with it, you know. Okay, so listen, and if my Irish accent bugs you, I'm sorry. Might be too cutesy, okay? So here we go. So listen to the words, and you can even jot down a sentence if it really speaks to you. Blessed be the day, the mind that dreamed the blueprint of your life would begin to glow on earth, illuminating all the faces and voices that would arrive to invite your soul to growth. And praise be your father and mother who loved you before you were here and trusted to call you here with no idea of who you'd become. And blessed be those that would love you into becoming who you're meant to be. And blessed be those that have crossed your life with dark gifts of hurts and loss. They've helped school your mind in the art of disappointment. When desolation surrounded you, blessed be those that looked for you and found you. Their kind hands, urgent to open a blue window in the gray wall formed around you. And blessed be the gifts that you never noticed: your health, your eyes to behold the world, memory to harvest vanished days, your heart to feel the world's waves, your breath to breathe the nourishment of distance made intimate by earth on this echoing day of your birth. So I'm going to put this up on the screen, and you're going to write what's called a glossa. Poets use this to inspire new poets. So what you do is you take one of the lines and you start writing whatever comes to you. And if you get lost, you can take that same line again and bring it back into your writing. This is called the echo effect with writing. So we're just trying to get into your right brain right now, because we're all Sunday morning, we haven't had enough coffee, and we're trying to get inspired enough to access that right brain that's rich with imagery. So here we go. And here's my face. I don't know where I went. Okay. Ah, Lordy, I can't see this, sorry. I had problems with my, there we go. So there's Amherst Island. That was one of my slides. I was so excited. Okay, so here is the poem. And can you read that, everyone? Oh, wait a minute, I can make it bigger. There, is that better? Okay, you'll have to.
You can go full screen, Deb.
I'm already a full screen, honey.
No, you're not.
Yep, it says I'm on.
What you are is you're in your slideshow. So you want to.
I'm on full screen. It says.
See the little X at the bottom?
Okay, it says.
The X at the bottom of your screen above. No. Okay, good, great. Now go.
It doesn't make.
Yeah, there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to time this for 7 minutes, and just keep your pen moving. And if you feel frustrated, you can take another line, but just take 1 or 2 lines and see where it leads you. We're just getting our brain warmed up. Thank you. And you have 2 minutes. Okay, you can wind it up and please put a title on the top of it, just what you want to call it. So poetry is a great way to get us into right brain thinking. So is music, because anything that evokes emotion is activated in the right brain. So when you sit down to write and all you say, I'm going to write 7 minutes, you're just going to end up writing stuff you wrote yesterday. But if you do emotional stuff, it'll get you into a different space, or it'll take you back to the space that you were in when you started to create a story. And the thing that I always say to do, especially if you're a new writer, title these pieces so you kind of know what you were thinking. Let's say you got some good work in there and you liked it, just title it so you get used to saying this is what encapsulates this little piece of writing. You're never going to show it to anybody. The second thing that I like to do is I do breadcrumbs, where I try to write at the bottom little ideas that came up, but my hand couldn't move fast enough to get to. So the breadcrumbs are for tomorrow when I come back to the trail and I'm lost, like, oh my gosh, I have nothing to write. Especially like if you're writing a story. I just finished a book that I wrote and I read it and I just wanted to get back in and rewrite it. And I thought, no, I need to leave it. It needs to steep a bit. But as I was reading, I just put breadcrumbs, like I should have said this here. And then I found out I say it later. Maybe I'll move that up there. So I just do breadcrumbs because once I'm in that creative space, it's hard in the day to go back to it. So I'll think of things. And as Michael said, I have a pen and a paper. I also do the voice notes just to remind myself because I have a brain like a sieve. So anything that gives you a sense of, I did 7 minutes, I started something, and I ended something. And I always say, I hate facing a blank page. I worked for a TV show for a couple of years, and we'd finish Thursday, and we were spent because it was a huge day. It was a 15-hour day of taping, and we had to start writing on Monday morning. So Friday, I just got up and wrote all my ideas for Monday morning because I didn't want to go Monday and face a blank page. The blank page was what would drive me insane. So before we move on, are there any does anyone want to share? You can unmute yourself now. A phrase that spoke to you. If you're reading later, maybe you could just let other people share first. And then if we have time, we can get to you. So is there anybody that's got, I'd like to tell you what happened with mine, because it's a very tender piece of poetry, but it may not have been tender to you the way you wrote it. So I can't see your hands, so you'll have to unmute.
I could share a little bit.
Thank you, Kathy, and then Julia.
Dark gifts. Oh,
Sorry, go ahead.
okay. Dark gifts of a world with unspoken rules, whose doors you open only through wrong action. Dark gifts which left no room for light, the light of day, the light of belonging, the light of beginning again and again. Gifts of hurt when your aunt was diagnosed. Anyway, it goes on, but.
That's very poetic.
Well, I kind of did it like poetry, like.
But that's from you, right?
Yes.
No, but that's what I'm saying. There's a poet there that when you read poetry, you'll access those images so that you can start to trust in those images for your writing. That's very good. Poetry might be a really good way for you to, you know, bring that more into when you get into your stories too, right? Yeah, that's lovely imagery. We have to piggyback other people's creativity in order to access our own. This was well known back in the old days. People would paint pictures exactly like Da Vinci or whoever, and because we needed to piggyback in order to get our own voice. And at the beginning, you have a voice, but you're just not sure about it yet. Okay, I think we'll do Julia and then Cheryl, and then we'll move on. Do you want to unmute? You have to unmute, darling.
Yes, good. Yes, thank you. This is so interesting. Anyway, my line was a heart to feel the world's waves. And I was writing about my time as a court reporter, which really resonated with me, and which I'm trying to figure out how to write about. So I wrote a few lines, but not poetry, prose. The work of the courthouse, being in criminal court day after day, made me feel inexplicably better. That sounds grisly, but the actual wrongs I had experienced, from bad behavior, well, let's call it bullying, to criminal activity, theft, wage fraud, it turned out there was a name for it, and it was in my Martin's Criminal Code of Canada. And there was a room and a judge and orderly examination. Sometimes the evidence just wasn't there. But did people feel better about being listened to? Sometimes the judge talked about the issues facing the criminal, and sometimes the witnesses used poetic words, and sometimes they were funny. By and large, people were at their best. And I was certainly at my best, touched with recording what transpired for all time.
Great. That's really nice. I don't think I've ever heard you write like that, Julie. That's beautiful. And it's so factual, yet it's got this heart to it. You know, it's very factual. It's very, remember that play, The Year of Magical Thinking? It's very clinical, but in the clinical, it's a book by Joan Didion, but she just describes her daughter's death in this clinical medical way. And in the clinician side of her writing, you just feel her heart breaking. So she doesn't ever say my heart's breaking, but even though you didn't say the heart line in your writing, we could feel the heart in it. Very nice writing. And I would title that because it's something you might want to go back to. How about Cheryl? I think you have to press a number, don't you, Cheryl? Something like pound or *9 or something?
No, I'm okay. I've got it on me.
And what was the line you thought of?
Well, I praised be to the blueprint of my life. And it turned into a prayer.
Okay, do the prayer, baby.
I'm just going to take the last part. Praise be the blueprint that in its unrolling across the lined pages of my journals, of blank spaces on my Mac Pro, the way so to remind me that in the forgetting, it is the time to give praise. And now in the third act, I got lost here, but sorry.
Now in the third act.
The computer. And now in the third act, I pause to give notice to give praise for the one man who weathered this past 47 years with me, and now in my unrolling of blueprints of my life. I am also grateful for my parents, not for what they gave me so much, but for what they couldn't give me, but because in the lacking that caused me to find my own way and on to my own path on this blueprint. Praise be.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Wow, that's
Thank-
beautiful.
Thank
Should
you.
open with that poem. That's great. It's funny how reading poetry makes us more poetic because we take the risk then. And poetry is all right brain. It's all imagery. Reading good literature and all of that, it just makes our work better. Even as a comedian, like I sound like that's, but I always say poetry and comedy is exactly the same, except comedy's funny, is that it's muscled, you know, it's muscled. It's very image oriented, right? So I find if I listen to comics, I get jealous. I wish I'd made the joke. But if I read poetry, I know I'm not a poet. So it frees me up to be funny. And it frees me up to be serious. It frees me up to access all those emotions. Or as John Kabat-Zinn said, you know, we lay out the welcome mat for all the emotions to exist. And that's what writing can do. We lay out the welcome mat and say, here, I got a pen. Let's see what goes on here. And we get to put it down on paper. I'm going to move on now because we have so many fun things. Okay, so we have this poetic version of ourselves where we kind of are part of, especially when you first get an idea, it's almost like God or whatever runs the universe just goes, here's the idea, and like flashes you and you think you're part of God's plan for about 10 seconds. And then God puts the coat back on, does it up and says, you find the idea now. And it takes you like 6 months to get back to what you thought was your insight. And that's part of the deal, right? So it's through the ordinary, experiencing the ordinary on the page that we get pictures for the reader to see. We lay down pictures. So I want to talk about my birth. It's my birthday. Well, it was my birthday a week ago. And then we're going to write, okay? So this is from a book, Outrunning Crazy, and I said it was fiction, but this part's pretty well true, okay? Legend has it, I was born 3 weeks late. My mother, Alberta, wanted to be one of those women who went out to the field, popped out a kid, and was back on her feet before the end of the day. However, I didn't get the memo because I was lollygagging around inside of her. She said it was like I walked into her womb and forgot what I went in for. What were you doing in there all those days? She'd asked me this over and over as the years went on, as she showed me her cesarean scar one more time. Look what you did to my body. She waited and waited and waited until one day, after a feed of liver and onions, she couldn't quit belching. King, my dad, said he knew it was because the baby was about to be born, but she said he didn't know a damn thing because he was a damn man. And after 10 hours of screaming and farting, she called the doctor and he delivered me. But he said, you're going to have to go in for a C-section. And then, after 13 hours and $300, I made my debut. OHIP had not been invented yet, so my mother mentioned the price every birthday. And all that time and money wasted to what I could have been doing at home. The other kids knew enough to come out, but not you. What was wrong with you? A lot of kids liked their birth stories, but I didn't. I was round and plump and colicky, and for 6 months I bleated like a calf. King bragged he was the only one who could settle me. He'd spend half the night walking the floors with me, sticking me up under his armpit. And then I'd pass out. His pits always smelled like onion, fresh cut onion. And when Alberta came out in the morning, we'd be nestled together on the couch. So birthdays are great spaces because there's something supposed to happen on a birthday. I'm not talking about a party birthday, but a birthday. So what I want you to write now is I want you to start with this sentence. And if you've written about your own birth so many times you can't stand it, you can try to write about someone else's. This is the sentence you're going to start with. Legend has it, on the day of my birth, And now you obviously weren't there except for the slapping part probably, but you can create space around the birth. You don't have to give us every cramp. But what was going on in your parents' world, your mom's world, your dad's world, or perhaps outside the door, you know, in the world out there, what year you were born in. And I want you to describe, like you've got a camera on the event. And you can, when it say legend has it, you can exaggerate a little bit because our birth stories get exaggerated over the years, you know what I mean? And if you want to do a little bit of stretching the truth, we'd be happy to hear it because that's where the funny comes from. So we'll give you 7 minutes. Great. 1 minute. And now wrap it up and put some notes down if you've come up with things that you haven't got time to look at. And give it a title. Okay, great. So it's really fascinating what we can come up with in 7 minutes. Like, we think, well, I can't write today because there's not enough time. And some of you might have said, I just wrote for 7 minutes and nothing happened and I think I did it wrong, but that's okay. You're just meeting your mind here. We're not worried about how good you are yet. We're daring to suck, as they say. All right, so just, does anybody want to give a generic share of what they wrote? We have Nancy, and we have Peter and some new people. Donna's back. Does anybody who hasn't been here before want to share something? Julianne, how about you? You want to share? Just even if you want to just talk about what you were going to write. I'm asking you to unmute, so I think you have to.
Sorry, I was trying to do it myself.
That's good. How are you? Good to see you.
Well, actually, it was kind of interesting because my mother was talking about the difference between when I was born and when my youngest brother was born. Because I was born in 1969, so it was the cusp of a big change. So I started talking about that, and it made me kind of sad for her because I was born very antiseptically, and my youngest brother, who has since died, was born in a very loving and intimate way. So it brought up a lot of very interesting thoughts, and I appreciate that.
Oh, good, good. And you don't have to share it, but it's just nice when you can access that part of yourself. In our busyness of our lives, sometimes this grief or these feelings kind of chase us, but we never kind of turn and look at them. That's why turning and looking at them on the page is sometimes just, and also 7 minutes contains it so that it doesn't get you too sad if you have to go on with your day, etc.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here, Julie. I'm glad you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. And Peter, did you want to talk at all? And I'm asked, no, okay, just want to enjoy. Great. Anybody else that is new? Or Michael, and then Kathleen, and then we'll move on. Oh, Michael, I have to unmute you, darling.
I
did. Okay.
Hello?
Yep, you're good.
May I just read it, just to share?
Yes. Yes.
So I'm calling this, That Was Close. Legend has it, on the day of my birth, the sun shone out my ass. I was perfect, really. On time, in a hospital that now no longer exists. 7 pounds, 14 ounces, a manageable weight. Certainly not the 10 plus pounds my older brother was. The older brother that was living, that is. You see, I was a replacement. I was an in lieu of. My parents did the math. Everything goes into 2 a lot easier than 3, 4, or 5. The church was not pleased. But I am not number 2. I am number 3. And if not for the death of he, I would not be me.
Great. That's good. It's a great picture. It's lovely. The day of our birth is got so much attached to it, right? I mean, it's an interesting thing because there's always a story around it. And the truth is, people put stories on top of us right from the time we're born. They start writing their story on us, right? And as a writer, you're kind of sometimes going in and just like looking at the story and seeing if it's true anymore. You know, you're just like, oh, this is a story that got written on me. I'm apparently very difficult. And then well, I really wasn't at that time. I became it later or whatever. So this is great. I'd love to hear more about that birth. I think we'll do Kathleen, and then we're going to move on to our readers.
Okay, just quickly, I'm not going to read what I wrote, and my mother my mom was a nurse, but one thing she really stressed about my birth was that she'd only gained 25 pounds, and she always watched her figure, and she only gained 25 pounds for each of her children, and that's why she didn't really ever have a difficult labor except for my brother. But with me, she stressed the fact that I weighed 6 pounds, 6 ounces. She was happy that I wasn't like a big buxom baby. She liked to tell me how she put on red lipstick before my father came into the room. So my mother was a woman of substance, but telling this story, she sounds like a very shallow babe indeed. But anyway, so thanks to my mother and her concern for her figure, it was an easy labor there. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. I love the detail of lipstick because your mom, I've heard stories about your mom, and she did go through a lot in her life, and she is a woman of substance. And so when she has lipstick, it's like, damn it, I'm going to wear my lipstick, right? So this detail. So today is I'm August 6th is my birthday, but my anniversary for my writing classes is this now. And these are very auspicious kinds of times. And what I want to say is if you want to write a story, it's great to write stories around a time where somebody is going to change personally, but they also might be going through a passage in their life that is kind of deemed a certain important passage, like a birth, like a death, like I'm turning 40. This is the first time I've ever ... Because we're not just born by ourselves in our own bodies. We're born in a time period. Today, people are born in COVID. People were born in World War II. People were born in refugee camps. A friend of mine from the Ukraine, her mother had her while they were escaping into Germany, and her mother would have to jump off the trains they were on and breastfeed her. So we all come in with a story, but we're not part of we're not alone, and we're not just we're not just us with our story. We think it is that, but the moment before we came in, this is really important, the moment before your story started is really important for you as a writer to know, because as actors, we never just walk into a scene with nothing going on. We walk in with a story in our head of what went on. We got fired, we ate cabbage, whatever. But same with any story you write, there has to be a moment before. And that a lot of writers like to set that environment up so the reader can be invited into the reality of that story. So we've got 3 writers, and one of the things that we've started to do in this class, which I really kind of enjoy, is not only writing your own work, but listening to others. So when you hear these stories, I don't want you to think they should do this or that. It's not prescriptive. I don't believe in prescribing, especially when people are putting their hearts on the line. They're all starting these stories, are very new stories, but they put a lot of effort into them. But I want you to listen and say, where does this story speak to me? Where's that? Where was it an image there that I liked? Where did I lose interest maybe? Because writers don't need, you know what you could do? I mean, if anyone tells me that, I just run. You know what you could do? You could be different. No, I want to know what my story is, and I want these writers to know what their story is. So your job is to listen, and if a line or 2 resonates with you, write it down. So we're going to go in this order. We're going to go with Leanne, and then we're going to go with Sandra, and then we're going to go with Christine. We're going to read them and then have maybe 2 comments, and we'll move on because I've talked to them quite a bit about it. And they had to contain these stories. Stories need a container, 500 or 600 words. And every single piece of writing I've ever done in my life, there's a word count. Like, you know what I mean? Like, maybe not a book, but CBC does the debaters. It's 250 words, funny words. Don't put any more or less in. 500 words for magazines. So sometimes a container really helps you make a decision. So it's not just abstract writing forever. Leanne, you're up. You're not unmuted. You're still muted, sweetie.
There we go. Unmuted
Okay,
now. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Good. Thanks. Hello, everyone.
Oh, and Leanne, just read a little slower than you normally would, so that they can really hear the imagery.
Okay. Great. I have to tell your parents, she said, so why don't you tell them first? I had been caught skipping school by my favorite aunt, Maureen. I wore thick glasses and smoked cigarettes in the bathroom. No matter what idiotic thing I did, Maureen looked at me with a kind of eye-crinkling delight. When I bought a bathing suit on sale that went transparent in the water, she hooted with laughter. When I was supposed to be babysitting my younger brother and left him alone in our backyard for 2 hours, she saw it as a way to build his 3-year-old resilience. She always found me a way through my chronic teenage carelessness. I adored having her eyes on me. To me, she could do no wrong. She was the mother I could never disappoint. When I was younger, Maureen had been married to Johnny. Johnny was extremely good looking, short, and a bellhop. Maureen showed up at our 2-bedroom apartment with her sons on a bitter cold February night. Jeffrey, 7, was crying, snot running down his face, and Jimmy, 5, stood apart, observing everyone from the distance that would later inform his whole life. My Uncle Johnny had been on a tear, drinking and screaming and hitting her and the boys, and Maureen had come to us for help. Inside the apartment, I could hear a car door slam on the street, and then Johnny's angry steps up the concrete apartment stairs. He slammed our front door with his fist. Then again, "Come out here now, Maureen. I am going to kill you," banging on the door, throwing his drunk body against it. Maureen started shaking beside me. I reached up and held her hot hand and moved my small pajamaed body between her and the vibrating door. My father shifted his weight from foot to foot, his options moving left to right, the heat in him finally showing up cold. My mother was shouting, "Leave it alone, Mac. Don't do anything." I watched my father reach into the hall closet closest to the door and pull out his shotgun, the one he used to pick off gophers up at the cottage. Maureen and I stood small behind him. He swung the apartment door open. Johnny stepped back and held up his hands, protecting his perfect face. "Jesus, Mac, I didn't mean it. Okay. Backing down the stairs, moving fast. I'm going. And then on the street, with the courage of distance, "I'll get you, you bastard. Just wait, I'll get you." Then the car starting up in the cold night and squealing down the street. Maureen laid the boys on the brown couch in the living room and sat on the floor. I sat beside her, her body leaning into mine. She began to shiver as if cold. Her boots were still on and her legs were straight in front of her. "What will I do? What will I do now?" she said. "You'll sleep with Annie tonight," my father said. "You'll sleep with Annie and we'll decide what to do next in the morning." I slept with my aunt that night in my single bed with its Barbie sheets, and I woke up still holding Maureen's hand, feeling brave. "I will always protect you," I said to my waking aunt. She gave me a small, wistful smile. "And I will always love you," she replied. Now, 6 years later, after Maureen had left Johnny, it was Maureen who caught me in Place Ville Marie in downtown Montreal, smoking cigarettes and skipping school. And it was Maureen who stood there threatening to tell my parents. I wanted to say, "But you slept in my bed. I held you tight. You were supposed to love me forever." I reached for a cigarette in my tightly held pack, lit it, and said, "You're a traitor and a bitch," and threw the smoking butt at her feet instead. The end.
Yay, that's great.
Thanks.
So that is wonderful. Every detail pushed the story forward. It's really nice. And you edited that a couple of times. And how did you feel about it, Leanne?
What I didn't understand until the last edit, Deb kept on sending back to me saying there's too much here, was that that it was the story that was important. I kind of thought the writing was.
Exactly. It's a
I got
story.
really attached to, like, it was full 100% longer, by the way.
Yeah.
And there was some great writing in there, guys. Really, there was, but it just got in the way of the story.
Yeah, you have to, what Henry Miller says, give up your lovelies. Like you have to surrender your lovelies. Oh, I love that phrase. It's so delicious. And then I always put them in another file and just say they'll come back one day. And they don't. They just get pushed to another piece and someone cuts them out. But the story is, whose story is it? That's really important as a writer. You first, when you do memory work, you're just meandering around in memory. And you're just like, I don't know whose story it is yet. There was this scene with my aunt, this guy. And at first, the story was really between the aunt and the uncle a lot.
Yeah.
But you moved it up so that it was about you. You put the camera on you in the story. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel? Satisfied with that process?
Yeah, I'm so much happier. I loved it the first one, and now it looks fat. So I'm really happy.
Yeah, and I was talking to actually a couple of other people who were writing this week, and I always say put that fat stuff, because that imagery might come back later in a piece. If it was like the story of your life, or you did 5 memoir, you might bring up one image. I'll tell you the image I bring up in every piece I write, and every piece it gets cut, is he was my soft place to fall. And my editor, who has read everything in my, she goes, you bring that, he was my soft place to fall, every friggin' blog, every friggin'. So I like to keep them, but because they're really fun for me, but sometimes you have to just let them be. What I really like about this is there is action and there is transformation. You know, like if we want an anecdote, it could be, you know, and then my uncle said this, and then my aunt said this. Oh, by the way, they got 2 kids, but she was pregnant. All of which is great in at a dinner party, because we can transfer. But on the page, you can still put more padding in there, but it's more like each word, each phrase has to move the reader into the story and keep the camera on what you want us to see. And also in this case, it's Leanne or Annie. I don't know if that was your nickname, but it's that character, that's the little girl who goes through the transformation in the story. What's her transformation? What happens to her? Anybody? Put your hand up. Candace, I'll let it, Alana.
She grows up. She's starting to grow up. Like she adores Aunt Maureen. And then Aunt Maureen at that time betrays her. So she's got to separate from her. That's what I.
And all stories are good when they're around a passage in life where it's not just her personal fuck you, Maureen type of deal, but what is happening to Leanne at that point? Where is she in her life? It got cut out kind of what her age was, but yeah, you know what, we cut that out, and maybe we need that, is just that she was 13 or 14, right? Like it's that teenage thing, you know what I mean? It's that moment when I was a good girl and I did everything right and my aunt liked it, and fuck her. And I love that we didn't have to wait up for that. Like, you know what I mean? Like we didn't have to work up to it. It just comes. You know, she's got a decision to make. And at 14 or whatever age you were, that's the decision. Screw you. Candace, we're going to wait because you're reading. So I'm just trying to get other people. One last thing, Mark.
The images grew with the characters. Like there was really clear beats of moments that.
You froze up there, honey. We'll come back to you. You're frozen. I'm going to mute you. Okay, good. that was excellent, Leanne. And also, I just want to say that when you read something out loud, you can get away with bad writing because you can put the energy into it. But this writing, because I've read it so many times, it lands on the page and the story's on the page. So I just want you to know that you've got to have your story on the page. You can't go, oh yeah, but there was a frog over there. Did I mention that? Because like, you know, we tend to leave out the most important part, and it has to be on the page. Mark, you're back. Did you want to say anything else? You have to unmute, sweetie.
Okay. So I was just saying that the beats of the story were quite clear. Can you hear me?
Yep.
And it flowed so nicely, especially the idea that there they were sleeping in her bed with the Barbie sheets, and then they came up to present time where she was blasphemous smoking. So it was a nice growth of the characters by the really lovely descriptions of their situations.
Yeah. Also, there was a little bit in the earlier drafts about where you lived. And if I was going to do another story, I would start where you lived and take us through who you were by the time that bitch line happened. So start another little section and to show us who you were becoming at that time. If you're interested in that memoir, I mean, maybe you're not, and don't write anything I say, but to me, it's like, I'd like to know how she got there, you know, and then that part about I was a cute kid and now I, you know, and all that stuff can go later, because now we don't know who you are yet, but we're excited to know it. You got to have an ending in all your stories that makes the reader want more. They can't just be like, and then I was a good person. It's got to be like, I learned something, but I want to know that there might be a little bit more. Sorry, Michael, you putting your hand up?
May I just give a couple of cents?
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the cigarette smoking is so iconic in sort of getting caught or being judged. It's like, you're such a great person until you started smoking. Now, you know, I mean, I lit up my first cigarette, you know, at 17, but I have identified the trauma that did that.
Okay.
So it's one.
Yeah.
It was just one of those things that I enjoyed, that you go, you know, I didn't kill anybody. You didn't hurt anybody. You picked up a cigarette, and this is what you get in return for sleeping in my bed as a child. So,
I love it. Just one last thing before we go is Leanne did not have the cigarette like she had the cigarettes mentioned at the beginning, but when we edited it, we talked about that like she had to use the physical reality of the cigarettes. Whatever you set up at the beginning, you have to bring back at the end. The beginning, the end is in the beginning. So those cigarettes, which is what's going to cause her not to be liked, have to come back as part of the issue. So there was a lot more. You're a bitch. You're like my dad. It was like a lot of that, but the cigarette just says it. You know what I mean? Here you go. Here's the stamp. We show what we want the reader to see. We don't tell them. Good. All right, we're moving on now. We've got Sandra. Could you unmute?
Hi.
Hi, Sandra.
Oh, this has been so great. I haven't had a chance to say hi, but oh my God, I've been loving every minute. Thanks so much, Leanne. Loved it.
Sandra always does cooking videos on Facebook, so I'm expecting that she's going to make cookies as well as read her story.
Yes, scones. We'll all have scones.
Now, Sandra is coming at her storytelling from a different perspective. So it just, again, where does it interest you, and where do you feel, you know, oh, I'd like to know more or whatever. So just read nicely, darling.
Okay. It's called Hardware and Lactation. My mom, 91, her name's Helen, recently moved to a retirement home, fighting me all the way, balking at losing her hard-won independence. She has an impressive list of accomplishments: artist, seamstress, canoe builder, skier, writer, and recently I learned secret, subversive. To understand, I'll give you some backstory. In 1947, at 18, Mom emigrated to Scarborough, her family escaping bombed out London. A year later, she married my dad, who was newly home from the army. They built a house together and popped out 5 babies. Growing up, I could see that my mom wasn't like other kids' moms, and I was both embarrassed and awed by her. My dad was opinionated and bad-tempered, and he ruled us with bouts of rage and abuse. Looking back, I see that he was frustrated working at jobs beneath his talents. While Mom had always pursued a few personal interests, they'd been safely within the realm of housewife and Dad's level of tolerance, like heading up a chapter of the La Leche League at a time when very few North American women breastfed their babies. In 1968, when I was 14, Dad quit his job to start his own development firm. But success eluded him and the money ran out. To make ends meet, Mom took a job at the local hardware store as the bookkeeper. The whole notion of a wife and mother working at a job was foreign to her, but her Depression-era survival instincts kicked in. She whipped that chaotic hardware store into shape, organizing the accounts and making herself indispensable. The wages were meager, but enough to pay the mortgage and buy groceries until Dad got a new job. But even then, she didn't quit her job. Earning her own money built her confidence. Now she began to challenge Dad's decrees and bad moods. Even as she held down her job at the hardware store, Mom still spent hours a week counseling nursing mothers on the one and only phone in our cramped small house. Whether I wanted to or not, I got a daily education in lactation issues and baby care. I remember one young mother, Mary, who called repeatedly as her baby failed to thrive. From the one-sided conversation I overheard, I knew that the baby had not been to the doctor because the father, Jack, was a draft dodger and without the legal status needed to work. The family was starving. And that's why Mary wasn't making enough milk. Until recently, I never knew what happened to that family. As Mom confided to me a few months ago, back in those days, it was the employer vouching for the legality of the employee rather than the individual who applied for the social insurance number. So, mustering up her newfound confidence, Helen persuaded the hardware store owner to hire Jack, and she fraudulently applied for his social insurance number. So the baby lived. Mom told no one what she'd done, not even my father, and she got away with it. And that should have been the end of it. But Jack and Mary had several other dodgy American friends, and over the next few years, Mom acquired sins for all of them. They'd be senior citizens themselves by now. Is there a statute of limitations on these sorts of things? Surely no prosecutor would jail an old lady with a pacemaker, a broken shoulder, a failing memory, and worse hearing. But just in case, let's keep her secret, shall we?
Wow. Great. So that changed a lot since I edited it, but that wasn't all there before. So I don't have comments on it because you did another edit that you'd sent me, but then you said it was the wrong edit kind of thing. So this is all good. So how do people feel? What resonated? Did you think, what did you want more of?
I'll start if I could.
Go ahead there.
Thank you for sharing, Sandra. That was really fabulous. And I loved you the way I felt set up by the secret subversive, unlike a job in the La Leche League. And then you started with the fraudulent. So I felt like you really took me step by step. And I had that kind of shock of, middle-class women secretly doing fraudulent things with the government. So that was, I really liked how you set us up for that. And there was a couple of vision things, how success eluded him and the money ran out. So you kept, each step allowed me to kind of stay with you. I enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thanks. You can mute yourself there, Susan. Thank you. Who's next? Candace, I'm going to let you not share because you're going to be reading in a minute, and I just want you not to, I want other people to. Thanks. Jill. You have to unmute, Jill. Jill, you have to unmute.
Did I do it that time?
Yeah, darling.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. I really enjoyed this story. Well, both of them, but what I again with the subversive, I love the fact that, which has always been one of the things I love about how your mother at the beginning was, you know, she let herself, or she was a woman of her time, and the husband ran the, and no matter how abusive, but once she started making her own money, which she had to do to rescue the family, she began to grow confident. And that sort of, I love that theme about the fact that when she made money, she had confidence. And when she had confidence, she was like, I'm not letting this family starve. I'm, you know, even though it was done subversively, I just thought that was lovely. I really enjoyed that theme. It was very, it sort of inspiring.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
A woman ahead of her time.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So anything you'd like to see more of? If is this something you want to work on, Sandra? You're
Yes, I just, you know, I volunteered to read early on with
Powerful, and it's so educational. It's so educational. It's so timely. It's a now moment. And in the whole idea of your mother shaping the 10 days and the risks that you and your sister are taking, it is a significant piece of work. I'm really impressed. Thank you.
great. Good. So do you think you have enough to keep going there, Candace?
Yeah, and just to speak about the packing, I just thought it would be fun because to the original Mark's point, I arbitrarily shaped history in the sense of went through these agonizing decisions about what was going to be kept and what wasn't going to be kept for the family, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also found things in diaries and that were really like, oh my God, you know.
Right. So maybe it provoked.
I can just sort of pepper it in there.
Right, or you could have that the lights go over to the hospital and the waiting begins, and you can have scenes that way.
Yeah.
Anyway, you need to have more material, but you've got so much, like it's like Sandra's stories. It's got so much material. You have to just kind of hone on which one you would like to do. Great. So let's give everybody a round of applause. You can do your reactions. Yay! This is great. So I want to do one last exercise, and Kim's going to be included in this. And this is called, this is the kind of kid I was. Well, we grew up in a big family, and, you know, they were like, don't come in till supper. Like, we didn't have a lot of it. Like, it wasn't affectionate. You know what I mean? We didn't touch each other very much. But every birthday, my mom had a birthday party for us every 5 years because she had 6 kids. So she had every 5 years, 5, 10, 15. That's the only time I'm doing birthdays. But every year I thought I was the exception. And I would walk into the house that was quiet and be sure they were going to jump out and happy birthday. And then I did it with boyfriends, and I never got a surprise birthday party. It was so sad. So I am going to create a surprise birthday party for you to write about, and you're going to have 10 minutes to write this story. And you know the Great British Bake Off? This is the Deb's write-off. So you have to take these 3 clues I'm going to give you, and I'm going to put them up. I'm going to lay them all out first, and you have to decide which clue's first, which clue is going to be the middle, and which clue is going to be the end. Because so this exercise is called first line, middle line, third line. So it forces you to write to the middle, and then it forces you to go to the end. And it's probably not going to be fabulous because you're going to be like, you know, just doing your thing. So the first clue that we're going to do is this one. Got those guys. So I don't want you to write until I give you all the clues. So Helen, was your mom's name Helen, Sandra? Oh, wait. Was it Helen? Anyway, call it whoever you want.
Yes, it's Helen. Yes,
Yeah,
for
but
sure. And she does.
don't use your mother. Just use Margaret or somebody else, okay?
Okay.
So Helen rolled into the room, or Margaret rolled into the room. You can write that as your first sentence. Well, you can just write 3 lines down. Okay? And then this is the second piece you're going to hear, and could this is what you're going to hear, and I want you to listen to this and make a decision. Can you unmute? And could you turn, here you go. Now, Kim's going to sing. Second.
Women don't like a woman if she always speaks her mind. But the men are crazy about her, cause she loves to take her time. Love me with a feeling. Love me with a feeling. You gotta love me with a feeling. Oh, don't love me at all.
Thank you. And we'll be back in a minute to you, Miss Kim. Just hang on there.
Okay.
So the second clue is Margaret rolled herself into the room. It's that common room you saw. The second is this song, Love Me With a Feeling. And then this is the third clue. And then she saw this guy. So I want you to decide.
No, we can't see anything.
You can't see it? Oh, sorry. I apologize. Resume share then. Can you see it now?
We're supposed to see a white band in the middle of the black page, Deborah?
No, sorry. It's something is screwed up here. Just a minute. Let me do it again, guys. This was all good when I tried it by myself.
Your
Okay.
video looks off, Deborah, by the way. We can't see your face anymore. There we go.
Then she saw. Okay.
Right. So it's the nursing home picture. There's the music. And then there's the man. And I'm going to stop sharing. And Kim, we're going to mute you. And we'll be back in 10 minutes. I'm going to call it at 5, so you know you have to hit these 3 marks in 10 minutes. Great.
Okay, mute.
Kim, you have to mute, honey. And turn your camera off until
I'm happy to.
You're halfway through. You've got 90 seconds, so you should be hitting your third point, whatever that is, to end it. So set yourself up for that and go toward the end. And wrap it up. 30 seconds. And remember to title this. And if you have any ideas, oh my gosh, I thought of something I wanted to write about somewhere else, just make sure you leave breadcrumbs if you want. You may have it all done and wonderful. And we will just have a couple minutes of sharing, but a reason I like doing this, new writers in particular don't want to sit down and make a decision. A lot of times they ramble around writing and writing and writing, and they're not making a decision. This is what I want to say. And so putting a constraint around it and saying, I want to start the story here, I want to end it here, and I think this is in the middle. It doesn't mean you're going to have a perfect draft at all, but it forces your mind to go toward the idea. Your mind loves knowing what to do. It just loves it just loves going, oh, she wants me to get to the part where Kim sings. I get that. So anybody want to unmute and just kind of talk about what happened for them? Can you just unmute? I can't see you actually.
I could start a little bit.
Yeah.
It's Kathy.
Kathy, hi.
So for me, I'm always surprised by, I started talking about Margaret, and it's like, I don't even know Margaret, but she knows herself, and she just starts telling her story, like she's this older woman and she's been living in this home for 5 months and she's had a stroke, and she's talking about her husband of 47 years. It's almost like it just like, when you open it up like that, where I'm not writing a story about me, but it's about somebody else, it just, I know her last name, I know what her husband does, this guy, she is a guy. Anyway, at the end.
What did the music do for her?
The music reminds her of her husband. So she, Don't Love Me, or Don't Love Me at All. She said he had loved her long and hard, through love and hate, that anyone married as long as they had been, could tell you all about.
And who was the other guy?
And the other guy was Harold, and she was speechless at the end. She was lost in the moment of their first kiss some 53 years ago.
Harold and her?
Yeah.
Oh, so she was thinking about this other guy, Harold, not the 47-year-old. Oh, well, there she goes.
Well, she kind of let him go as soon as she saw Harold in the room.
Yeah. So you mean we all do that? We drift off, and then you see something and it changes your mind. Okay, anybody else? That's great, Kathy. Anybody else want to share that hasn't shared yet? Donna, Nancy, do you want to share, Nancy? No, you're good? Okay. Sorry, who's that? Carolyn. Yeah, hi. Yeah. What happened to you? That?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to read this short. Helen rolled into the room, squeak, squeak, and that was before she opened her mouth, trying to exclaim her glee at seeing her daughters pretending to what to be at her surprise party. The squeak of her walker was a reminder that she was to be seen, also known alerted arrival rather than to be heard. Love me with a feeling. The sensual, sexy Kim Pollard sang it like she meant it. Would I, Helen, ever love to be lived with a feeling? And then she saw him, that white knight in a wheelchair who wanted to recite poetry to her whenever their failing bodies mustered a moment together. If only her daughters had not been alerted to the sordid tales of her sexual activity in here. Helen thinks, I'm only old, not dead.
I love Helen. I love her. That's great. And do you see, Do you guys get what I mean about compressing time and making a decision about your story? Do you understand that? Because it starts to then have structure. It forces you into structure. So if you've got to write a chapter and you go, it's going to be 2,500 words, I'm going to try to get to the middle of the chapter and it's got to have this happen. You can rewrite later, but it forces you to make a decision. I think when people start writing memoir, they go, oh, I remember this, but there's got to be a structure to it. Otherwise, it's just anecdotal, and it has to have shape. If it's going to have either a play like you, Sandra, might write, or Candace, you might like to write a play. You want it to transcend just you had to be there kind of story, right? Because you had to be there kinds of stories are great, but if you want to write something that people are moved by, they have to be provoked into action. So we're going to wrap.
Deborah, can I ask a question about that? So, like,
can I just stop just one sec? I'm going to just open that up because I want you to exactly what you're going to do is ask a question. Just going to open up to all questions about this workshop and what we're going to, what I'm doing in the fall. So Sandra, you're first, Susan, and then we're going to end with like a 2-minute thing as a goodbye. So I'm just, if anyone has to leave, I'm letting you know what's going on. Susan, take it away.
Thank you. So like the chapter I'm working on, the India chapter, how would I create those kinds of questions to give myself the structure to get myself going? So any chapter we're working on, how could we, didn't get it how to do it in my life.
Well, is it a big story?
Well, yeah, like
is the India story like 5 or 6 events?
Right, so cutting it down. Yeah,
No, I'm not saying cut it down. I'm just saying if it was 5 events that happened in India and you want 5 of those in the story, right. Why don't you say, I'm going to start the chapter here.
Yeah.
I landed in the plane, da 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 da.
Yeah.
Middle is going to be when a crisis happened. And then the ending is going to be where something got solved, but perhaps there was another question. You pick 3 events and just put the timer on. In your case, it has to be more than 7 minutes because you're writing a chapter. But you could do 3 7-minute sessions. I'll write 7 minutes on the beginning. I'll write 7 minutes on the middle. And I'll write 7 minutes at the end. Susan gets private coaching. So she's writing a bigger project, but would that help you just to get started? And it'll be a dog's breakfast, you know that? It
Yes.
won't be good, you're not going to be publishing it, but it'll get you started.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I think when you get a big chapter and a big story and you want to say this, you can get really lost. And you're going to say to yourself, I'm writing these first 7, I'm writing to the middle point. The second 7 is the middle, and the third 7 is the end. And then we can look at it during your coaching and see what else has to be put in there. The biggest problem of the writer when you get a big story, like Jill, your story in the hospital, it's so big you don't know which ones to play with first, right? So you had to work on them section by section. Any other questions, especially from people for this is your new time? We just write for 7 minutes. Sometimes we read, and sometimes we don't usually have songs. And I don't read usually as much, but that's what we're going to be doing. There's a 6-week class coming up September 27th. And it's basically how to tell a good story, how to structure your story. And I'm really good in the mediums of memoir and solo shows because that's what I've done. And I know how to make it funnier. Well, I know how to make it readable. You want a story that more than your cousin likes, right? You mean you want something that you go, I'd like somebody else to read this. It doesn't have to be famous, but you want to engage the writer. So that's what we would teach. Now, if you're new and you go, I don't want to ever read, these people that are here reading today didn't read at the beginning either. So we will definitely work at your own pace. You don't have to rush. And if you have any questions you'd prefer to ask me privately, you can either stay on the call after or email me and I'll give you a call. And before I do the final thing, is there any other questions? Yes, Julian.
Just a quick question. There's been such a wonderful, really appreciated joining everyone today and great to, just lovely. There is always this tension between going back in that personal memoir kind of space and doing something that's kind of new and creative and positive. And I'm probably drawing a bit of a line, an opposition there that isn't there. But I just wondered if that comes up and if that's something I can work with in a course like this, which is trying to keep all the, bit by bit anyway, deal with it, but keep all the crap in the closet, but try to write creatively in other contexts. I don't know whether that's a clear question, but does that come up a lot?
You don't want to bleed out, right? People don't want to bleed out. But if you want, I think that's why people always want to write children's stories. I'll just not bleed out with the children's story. I think what you have to do is if you get your technique well, the first draft might hurt a bit, but then the technique takes over. Just like what Leanne said, it's not about the writing, it's about the story. So if it's just memoir, but your court story is a great example because it's a story and you may have had 100 emotions. But I think, the piece that I would say is learn to love being on the page first before you handle those stories that might hurt too much. So encourage that creative part, that little girl that wants to write and create, as opposed to taking her out of the closet and say, we're going to deal with the worst memory you've ever had. That isn't probably where you should go at the beginning. And I would work that muscle up so that if you do step into that territory, you have a technique to get you through it. But if you just want to avoid it altogether, it seems to get worse. I feel like you have to go, okay, we'll do 7 minutes and then I'll talk about it in the class. Candace and then Leanne.
Yeah, I just wanted to say to that point, I've found it very therapeutic. I try and I don't write every day because I also find that I like Deb, try and blend some meditation in with the writing either after or before. But actually getting into those raw places has been really helpful. I almost think of it as an exorcism of things that have been sitting and festering for a long time, but Deb's course has really sort of allowed me to bring out things in a constructive way, and some things are topical and interesting and even funny, and some things aren't, but the exercise itself is really, I've found, very healthy.
Yeah, I think you have to be very precious with your child, your inner child, your creative part. You can't go, come out and play, and then I'm gonna yell at you. You gotta be very gentle with it. And Julia, if you feel like writing and I'm not trying to upsell you for the class because it may not be your fit, but I would, do very light writing by yourself and then come to the class and write and see if you open up. Then you don't have to share it, but at least you'll be with other people who also are trying to open up to their heart. Leanne, did you have a comment?
Sorry, my goddaughter's coming. She's leaving for Vancouver, so we're going to see her right now. But I just wanted to thank everyone. And for me, the greatest, really the big insight, I said it at the start, was to concentrate on the story. And, for me, I could write forever. And I love the turn of phrase, but if it's not moving the story forward, it never occurred to me to cut it. Anyway, so I'm really, really happy with that idea of the story as the bones in the practice. I have to go now, but thank you so much, everyone, and talk to you soon.
Okay, we just have one. Peter, did you have a question or were you saying goodbye? Ask to unmute. Yeah, hi, Peter.
I had a question. It was from a remark you made just there that you said, hopefully someone will want to read this. And I thought maybe that my question would be, how do we entice the reader to come into our work, or how do we add value to the work so that the person's wanting to read what we're doing?
Well, you have to write.
Yes, write first.
People want to be published before they've even written a word.
Yeah.
And they want to be famous. If my aunt reads this, your aunt's dead and you haven't written a word. So come here and write. And I know that your writing will get better.
Oh, okay.
And you already are coming. So you're going to get better. And I'm going to show you techniques to get better.
Right. Okay.
And then we'll worry about who's going to read it or where it lands. Because sometimes people want to write private stuff and then other people do want to land somewhere. I don't want to lose you all because Kim's going to take us out with a song. And just to let you know, notice your inbox. I got a loot bag for you all. And a birthday loot bag. And it's 3 stories about birth that I've written. And but at the end of each of those stories are prompts for you to write about what you'd like to write about. So this is my gift to you after 15 years. And if you want to take the class, you have to sign up by September 8th, and we're almost halfway full, so that's good. I didn't want to do the pitch, but I have to say it sometime. So I just want to say, because I loved the South Shore 15 years ago, I took this step of sharing what I've loved for years, and I've been able to be gifted with amazing people. I just want to tell you what's happened to me in 15 years. I've met a refugee from the Ukraine, from Senegal, from the Vietnam boat person who I coached for a year. She never wrote a word, but she told me her stories out loud, and I got to experience her journey to Canada. I went into a nursing home, and a woman told me her story every week about living on tulip flower in Holland during World War II. I got to hear the stories of 2 women who abandoned their kids and the guilt, comedians who wanted to be taken seriously, world travelers, and couch potatoes. And then the final time, I got to accompany one woman on her journey in dying. She wrote her life story, and she finished her life story the day before she died. I still miss her. I feel blessed to have been with people and meet them who want to sit and take the space, and people like you who are brave enough to share my birthday with me. And Kim, will you take us out? To unmute you, and hopefully, Kim, can you come on? Big dramatic. There you go. Okay, I gotta just ask you to unmute. Kim, you're not muted? Still muted?
Should stay talking full of clouds, and the old man winter begins to blow. You just call on my name, and you know wherever I am, I'll come running to see you again. Oh, baby, don't you know, winter, spring, summer, or fall, all you gotta do is call, and I'll be there, yes, I will. You've got a friend. Ain't it good to know you got a friend? Ain't it good to know we make friends?
Thank you, guys, and have a great day. And please sit down and write. And I'll hopefully see some of you soon. Take good care.
Thanks, Deb.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Deb.
Deb.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.